we were on mm, integration, diversification, mergers and acquisition. Yeah. So we were with types of mergers. I remember that we had to discuss types of mergers. So different types of mergers had to be discussed. And then we do have a new strategy coming up, and we will be discussing that as well. So that's all that we were supposed to do. And here we are with different types of mergers. Okay, with different types of mergers and with different types of diversification, I don't think there is any sort of difference between both of them. There is no actual difference between any of those, right? And since there is no difference, we need to undertake it like simply. We need to undertake it pretty simply. So pretty simply means that we just have to carry it on in a very simple manner, in a decent manner, with ways that could make things easier for all of us. So I'll just be very simple, right? Simple and sober. So you already have understood what is horizontally integrated diversification. Apart from the fact that with horizontally integrated diversification, you'll have to develop the products on your own, or develop the new product line on your own, or develop the ultimate thing on your own. Here you are not supposed to do so. So with horizontal merger, you'll be having an instant means of expansion. So you can just read it out and you can just understand it at the same time. Horizontal merger is a combination of firms engaged in the same industry. It is a merger with a direct competitor. So Pepsi acquiring Coke rather than trying to develop one of the flavors or trying to develop one of the products out of it, rather than trying to compete, they are just trying to acquire that particular firm. Okay, so the merger is with a direct competitor. Make sure that you understand, because he is on the same horizontal chain, right? So you just look at left and you just look at right and you find, oh, yeah, here my competitor is. Okay, so the principle, I'll just look at some things. What does it say? The principal objective behind this type of merger is to achieve economies of scale, right? So definitely, if you acquire your direct competitor, if you tend to merge with a direct competitor, you will be getting some leverage out of it, right? And that kind of leverage, if you get, I'm very sure that you would be directly benefited through it. Okay, so I'm saving some of the things for you guys. Okay, let's go ahead. So what does it say? Horizontal merger, vertical merger. So types of mergers are two types: horizontal merger and vertical merger. Horizontal merger is a combination of firms engaged in the same industry. It is a merger with a direct competitor. The principal objective behind this type of merger is to achieve economies of scale, widening the line of products, decreasing the working capital and fixed assets investment, getting rid of competition, and so on. So the concept is quite simple. For example, formation of Brook Bond Lipton India Limited through the merger of Lipton India and Brook Bond. So Brook Bond Lipton India Limited came in with the two beverage companies coming together and merging their interests together, and then deciding to do the business together. So horizontal merger is something like that only, and with it you can just acquire or merge with your competitor, and that's how it works, right? So ideally, what we have already learned for horizontally integrated diversification, somewhat and somehow this is something matching with horizontal merger. Same with vertical merger also. We have already studied vertically integrated diversification, and the line of discussion would remain again the same. So I'm taking it up again. It is a merger of two organizations that are operating in the same industry but at different stages of production or distribution system. So, ideally in the same vertical chain. So, I should say ideally in the same vertical chain. So, ideally it would be the same vertical chain. Okay, what else does it say? On the other hand, forward integration happens when an organization decides to take over its buyer organizations or distribution channels. So buyer organizations or distribution channels. So backward integration and forward integration. So backward integration and forward integration. So what is backward integration? If an organization takes over its suppliers or producers of raw material, then it leads to backward integration. So we have backward, now it should have been backward merger and backward forward merger, but it writes backward integration and forward integration, which again is a wrong terminology. But thanks to ICI, they have like not avoided it. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make you aware that it should be what? Backward merger and forward merger. Backward merger and forward merger. I hope that the concept is very clear, particularly clear for all of us. Vertical merger helps to create an advantageous position by restricting the supply of inputs to other players or by providing the inputs at a higher cost. So when you just merge, that means you merge with another entity or you try and absorb another entity. At that point of time, you'll be gaining an advantage because that particular entity could also be supplying to different other business competitors as well. But since you have now acquired them, you can just control them like anything, right? And this will like increase dependency of your competitors on your business basically. So this is something good. Okay. What the next topic says is a co-generic merger. We can directly compare it with what we read as the concentric diversification. So you can comparable. It's quite comparable with the concept of concentric diversification. So I'm also putting things together at the same time. So it's comparable with the concept of concentric diversification. Now, what does concentric diversification means? Okay, we have already studied that there would be just a loop-like structure. There would be just a little bit a loop-like connection, and ideally the businesses would be different from each other. They would be related only with a little way, right? It could be your marketing, it could be the process, or it could be the technology. So if you remember, it was like that. That concentric diversification will just have a slight link, either with some marketing, either with the process or with technology. So these were the three things that we had to talk about. Yes. So with the co-generic merger also we'll be just talking about what concentric diversification is. But however here we'll be acquiring some other firm or we'll be trying to merge with other firm. So it says in co-generic merger, two or more merging organizations are associated in some way or the other related to the production processes, business markets, or basic required technologies. Such merger include the extension of the product line or acquiring components that are required in the daily operations. It offers great opportunities to business to diversify around a common set of resources and strategic requirements. So, for example, an organization in the white goods category, such as a refrigerator, can diversify by merging with another organization having business in kitchen appliances. Or there is one more example: wash basin plus tap. So they can be marketed together, but however they are both different instruments as seen. Okay, conglomerate merger ultimately has to be superbly what? Unrelated. So it will be an unrelated merger. So conglomerate is always what? Completely unrelated. So would there be any synergistic gain? I would say no synergies at all. So there would be no synergy. Okay, with co-generic merger, I would say little synergy, or I should say some synergy, right? With the horizontal merger and vertical merger, you will always say what? High levels of synergy. So that would be high synergy for vertical merger, and it would be high synergy for what? For the horizontal merger as well. So we'll be having high synergies for all those things. I think we are quite clear, well understood, well aware of the fact, right? We are quite clear, having an understanding, well aware of facts and circumstances, and I'm very sure that we'll be able to take things forward with this. Okay, so that is what mergers and acquisitions means to me, and what's horizontal merger, vertical merger, co-generic merger, and conglomerate merger to all of us. Okay, there is one more concept, the new concept. Okay, let me just first discuss what your conglomerate merger is. Okay, so I'm just trying to read it through. Conglomerate mergers are the combination of organizations that are unrelated to each other. There are no linkages with respect to customer groups. There are no linkages with respect to customer groups, customer functions, and technology is being used. There are no important common factors between the organizations in production, marketing, research and development, and technology. So there is no common connection. There is no important thread between all of them, which can be considered as common. So both the new businesses are completely different, altogether different, and they are into very different industries altogether. So that makes me understand that okay, this is something else, all about something else. Now there is this one important concept which has been named as expansion through strategic alliance. First of all, talking about strategic alliance first of all needs to be like well taken care of, right? And talking about strategic alliance, I do feel that strategic alliance in itself means to join hands, right? So it's about joining hands. Now, if you decide to join hands with someone, I don't think there is an issue. But in this case, when you're joining hands, you are just setting some friendly terms. You're just setting some friendly terms. Setting some friendly terms, right? And you are creating what is called as a mutual benefit for each other. So what we call as a mutual benefit for each other, we are trying to just create that, right? So what has been created? A mutual benefit has been created. So you are not trying to be contractual, you are not trying to be bound by each other, but you are trying to treat each other's preferentially, right? There are a lot of strategic alliances that keep on happening between us also. People do ask me questions that which teacher to take for this particular subject, which teacher to take for this particular subject. Now there is no commission associated between all of us. There is no sideline discussion involved with all of us. But we just tend to refer to a particular person who we know that is doing good. And there are a lot of strategic alliances generally in the coaching industry. People don't come together to show up together under one banner, but they try and tend to suggest to someone. So that's also means of giving a good strategic alliance. Now, say for example, if there is a teacher X, and I keep suggesting that particular teacher X for classes for auditing, that X teacher also ultimately starts suggesting me for classes on EIS and lesson, and that's how we start moving forward, right? Because both the subjects are well in sync and they run together, so we decide to do so. And once we decide to do so, things start happening that way also. But there is no formal contract laid down between us. There are no formal set of rules laid down between us. We are just trying to work for each other's mutual benefit and gaining some advantages that we would not have been able to gain if we were just working alone. So that was it, right? From my end, that was it. And okay. So for this mutual benefit, you decide that you need to do something, right? You need to come together. Now, say for example, if I have a store where televisions are sold, right? Good deal of TVs, a nice deal of TVs, and we have been selling them, right? So television sets being sold by me. Now, whilst selling those television sets, whilst selling those television sets, just a moment, I've been occupied with something which I need to take up instantly, otherwise I would not have actually formed any disturbance between the class. So sorry to do so, but okay. So I was just creating one audit trail that was required for reconciling things, and it came up to me instantly. So if I would have forgotten it, it would have been a problem situation for me later on. Okay, I'm just coming up with things. So say for example, I am into selling televisions. There's just another guy having a showroom just after crossing the road that is passing through, right? And he is selling music systems, home theater systems. So he's a good specialist with home theater systems. I'm someone who is actually taking care of the televisions. So we just meet each other. There happens a meet and greet with amongst us. We sat on a coffee table and we decided. He says that Rajat bro. I say yes, dude. He says that shouldn't we just tie up? I said tie up for what? Like, see, you have been selling televisions. I said, yes. You have good quality televisions. Like, good quality televisions means that you're dealing with a very niche crowd. I said, yes. Then I asked him, okay, I can understand. I can just understand. What do you mean? Okay, you also tell me something. So he says that, see, I'm dealing with home theater systems. I'm dealing with the good branded high end home theater systems. So I said, okay, I must look at them first. So we just went around. I had a look at the showroom. I found it very nice. So he says that can't we just club together for selling both of the goods together? So you can have some combo offering wherein any person taking up a television can also be recommended for taking up a music system from me. And whenever someone comes for taking up a music system, I'll also recommend them that if you are looking for a television, this guy has the best quality televisions and has the best in class service provision. So you can look forward to it. So I said that yes, dude, deal done. Just let's shake hands. So this is a shake hand agreement, right? There is no formal contract involved. I even don't know if in future he might say it to his customers or not, or whether I'll be able to always notify my customers about him or not. But yes, we did decide to come together for our mutual benefit, which we could have taken for the capabilities that we have. Right? A lot of times a customer might be discouraged and might visit a better showroom, a three-story showroom wherein TVs are also there and sound systems are also there and probably some projectors and other devices are also there. But to put our interest together, to gain capabilities of each other, we might try to come for an alliance and say that at the same time we do have a shop here also, ma'am. And here we sell televisions. There is my friend, and we both have opened both these stores together. He, my friend, he sells very good, awesome sound systems, and you can just visit him, ma'am. Ma'am would say, okay, fine. Like, since you are trustworthy and you are saying that he is your friend, dear friend, I'm just going there. So that's how we can expand our capabilities. Otherwise, customers would also be lost in such case, right? So rather than losing customers, we can make customers. Okay, so that's the mutual benefit that comes through. Okay, so what do we mean by a strategic alliance? Okay, do you see a formal contract happening? I don't see so, and I am so sure that you will also understand this point from this particular initiation, from this particular origination, that there is no formal contract. A strategic alliance is a relationship between two or more businesses that enables each to achieve certain strategic objectives which neither would have been able to achieve on its own. A strategic alliance is less involved and less permanent as compared to a joint venture. So, had there been a joint venture, there would have been a formal contract, right? What has happened between Vodafone and Idea is a merger, and it's in the nature of joint venture coming together and then initiating something, right? So, this joint venture has to be created for the fact, right? This joint venture has to be created for the fact that there has to be a formal contract behind it. Right. So anything coming into a joint venture would have a legal contract, a formal contract coming with it. But with strategic alliance, we need not find anything that has to be formally put up. So we'll not have formal contracts. We'll just have what? We'll just have agreements. And agreements could be very much mutual, deciding on to do something together as much time as we are comfortable, and we can just put it off the moment we feel that we are not comfortable with it, right? Or maybe so that Rajat televisions may also start selling music instruments, music. I would say that speakers and things like that. And if I just start selling home theater systems on my own, I would deny partnering with anyone who is selling home theater systems, right? So it's as simple as that. Okay, so what has been written? The strategic partners maintain their status as independent and separate entities. So both entities still remain separate. If it was Rajat Televisions and if that was Rahul Home Theater Systems, they still remain the same. There is no RR home television systems. There's nothing like this formed. There is no absorption involved. There's nothing like that. Do we get an instant means of expansion? Yes, we do. But without even investing, without even trying to acquire, without taking up a controlling interest or without trying to merge, we just have advantages that we could have together rather than achieving anything on own. So this decision is just based on a mutual understanding, right? Without a contract coming into play. So your status still is independent. You're still a separate entity. You need not worry about what the other person is doing. You would not be asked by the other person that what are you doing, right? So it's that way. You can share the benefits and control over the partnership and continue to make contributions to the alliance until it is terminated. So as a teacher, like my classes, they also get listed on various portals, and there are various faculties also who we partner up with, who we have alliance with. At that point of time, making an alliance with them or partnering with them means what? Means just that we have decided to share benefits. That's it. Okay. What are the advantages of strategic alliance, as they say? I'll just explain each one of them one by one, first of all, before even going into the details of them, right? And then later on, we'll go into the details so that you have a better clarity of vision with it. Okay. See, there are four advantages of strategic alliance: organizational, economic, strategic, and political. I'll just take some one by one and put things to perspective. Okay, I'm first of all taking organizational, right, which has been mentioned first. Okay, what is an organizational advantage? See, I do know that if I was to sell televisions and if I'm selling it to a niche audience, to someone to the customers who have a niche category, and if I'm selling high end television systems, it's very easy to persuade them to buy a home theater system. But I do not have the capacity, I do not have the investment to put in, I do not have the money to invest in that much that I can also keep home theater systems. Nor do I have I space, nor do I have got any space in the showroom left, right, to host such systems and show them, showcase them, and then sell them. So at this point of time, I'm missing out on a capability which combined with my regular sales would have got me more customers. So therefore, I decided to partner with Rahul Home Theater Systems. And that's where I realized that if partnering with Rahul works together well, we will gain from each other's capabilities. So someone who is just visiting his shop may be also induced to buy a new TV, and someone coming to my shop can definitely be easily be induced to buy a home theater system, and we can have our mutual arrangements as well. Like I could give an extra discount on my TV, provided that both the things come together, or both the things are clubbed together and then brought up by the customer, and we can have some sharing done on that basis, but both will gain an advantage over it, even me and even Rahul. So both will have their own advantages with it. So that's the kind of benefits that you can obtain, right? So that's organizational capabilities, enhancement of organizational capabilities. So now instead of sending back someone that we do not keep home theater systems and you can look for it somewhere else, and someone hosting a deal of home theater system along with TV together could take an advantage from me. Now I can have both of the things hosted together with Rahul and me, and allowing them to take advantages of those things as well. So capabilities are now gained, right? So strategic alliance helps to learn necessary skills and obtain certain capabilities from strategic partners. Strategic partners may also help to enhance productive capacity, provide a distribution system, or extend supply chain. Okay, one more thing that I want to tell you is a commercial example. I do have a commercial example, so I'll be sharing one of the commercial examples that I have been taking up all the way through, right? I've been taking things these ways all the way through. So there is this one organization, Tata Motors. You know that there is another organization named Fiat Motors. So Fiat is the organization that generally gives the basic engine to almost every automaker. So almost every automaker uses an engine that comes from Fiat, and then does all the required things, all the required machining on it, and then assembles it to their own car. So that's generally happening in the market. So Fiat is a very large car engine dealer, right? It also makes two or three cars simultaneously. I just wanted to also emphasize that Ferrari, for a fact, is a sister concern of Fiat only. So Fiat owns the Ferrari, right? So that's uh, how much money Fiat holds, right? Just to emphasize on that fact. Okay, adding on to it, I'm just adding one more clause. Please listen to me very clearly. You know, Fiat in India has two types of cars, just two types of cars, and that were also like launched a lot of years ago, maybe a decade ago. And those were Punto and Linea. Yes, at least a decade ago. Punto and Linea. Fiat Punto, Fiat Linea. So these were the two cars that were launched by Fiat. At that point of time, Fiat decided to go into a strategic alliance with Tata Motors for sharing of showrooms. So Fiat in turn had a deal of giving engines to Tata Motors, maybe on a cheaper rate, and in turn, rather than paying money or rather than paying wholly in money, Tata Motors decided to share the showroom space with Fiat. So anybody who wants to buy a Fiat car could actually go to Tata Motors and buy one Fiat, rather than Fiat having its own showrooms. It just had a tie-up with Tata. This was for mutual benefits, so both gained from each other's capabilities. Fiat did not have marketing capabilities. Fiat did not have showroom space. It gained showroom space. Tata Motors always needed engines from Fiat, So they got engines from Fiat. So both ways the discussion was done well, and both ways the mutual benefits came out well. So that is something that is your organizational strategic capabilities. Okay, then comes this concept of being economic. Definitely, if you partner up with people, you generally tend to have economies of scale, right? So there can be reduction in cost and risks by distributing them across the members of the alliance. Production volume can increase, causing the per unit cost to decline. So when we'll be having both the things together, maybe more customers would start flowing in. So definitely, cost per unit shall also decline. Cost of operations per day shall also decline as compared to the revenue achieved, right? So finally, partners can take advantage of co-specialization, creating additional value. Example, when a leading computer manufacturer bundles its desktop with a leading monitor manufacturer's monitor. So that's also true, pretty true and pretty simple. Okay, going with the next advantage is the strategic advantage. Now strategy is something wherein, see, you might be competing earlier, but now you decide to cooperate. So it says rivals can join together to cooperate instead of compete. Vertical integration can be created where partners are part of supply chain. This may also help with future business opportunities and the development of new products and technologies. Strategic alliances may also be used to get access to new technologies or to pursue joint research and developmental efforts. To pursue joint research and developmental efforts. Okay, so you decide to cooperate instead of compete. Vertical integration can be created where partners are part of supply chain. So even that could be very good. So if there is a Nescafe and there is a Starbucks, Nescafe would still sell to other also, and Starbucks would still procure coffee from other providers as well. But at the same time, major part of it can be for each other, right? Nescafe can make its major coffee for Starbucks as compared to other cafes, and Starbucks can procure major part of its coffee from Nescafe. This is a strategic advantage, right? And that too in a vertical integration could also be a very good thing, right? This may also help with future business opportunities and the development of new products and technologies. Strategic alliances may also be used to get access to new technologies or to pursue joint research and development. So joint R&D shall also be something on cards. Okay, what does it mean by political? Sometimes strategic alliances are formed with a local foreign business to gain entry into a foreign market either because of local prejudices or legal barriers to entry. Now, just reading these two lines would just not satisfy or satiate your hunger. I'll just try and add more onto it. Okay, so your teacher apparently also has a business in Kuwait, right? So with Kuwait is in UAE, right? United Arab Emirates. And you know that to set up a business in Kuwait, right? I have an 11th and 12th class coaching business, CBSE in Kuwait. There are a lot of Indians residing in Kuwait. There are a lot of students from the south studying in Kuwait, and probably you might be knowing of this fact as well, right? So that the audience in the south, they most of them they know about it. That a lot of them have been have had known people in and around that have been working in Kuwait, and their students, their kids, right? They study in Kuwait. Okay, so a lot of 11th and 12th CBSE kids are in Kuwait, and there is a CBSE course curriculum running in Kuwait as well. So in the UAE, when I had to set up this business, for any business to be set up in UAE, you need to have a sheikh partner, right? So even when he does not invest, even when he does not do anything, you are supposed to have a sheikh partner, and that sheikh partner is someone who is necessary for going forward into any business. So definitely I had to connect with a sheikh, and once connected with that sheikh, that allowed me that allowed me to set up the business there. Otherwise, without the sheikh's involvement, without the sheikh's acceptance and approval, I would not have been able to enter into territory of Kuwait, right? So that's how it happened, and the sheikh partner agreed, and that's where I could put my business in. Yeah, you will have to pay the sheikh for his name, otherwise you would not have been able to enter into the business in Kuwait altogether, right? So that is something called a local prejudice, a local bias, right? That is something that you call as a local prejudice or a local bias. So without catering to that local prejudice or local bias, you'll not be able to set up a business itself in such countries. So there are some political barriers. In the UAE, the sheikhs are uh, like very less, right? They are very less in numbers. Like just 6 to 7% population of the entire UAE is just about sheikhs. Rest all population is generally filled with other national people, right? So you don't get nationality of UAE anyhow. If you're not a sheikh, you'll not get it, right? You'll not get it. So you also know that there is a monarchy principle there, and there is one particular royal family from which all the crown princes are being made, right? So all the crown prince of Dubai, crown prince of Saudi Arabia, crown prince of Abu Dhabi, right? They would all come from one sheikh family. So that particular sheikh family has developed rules as such so that the other sheikhs also feel happy around them and happy and protected around them. You know what kind of facilities do they get? Like if you are a sheikh in Dubai, you'll be getting uh, you'll be getting a sea facing villa. That is something that government will give you, right? Their government will give you. You'll always have free electricity, you'll always have free food, you'll always have free hospitalization, you'll always have free education for your children. So everything would be free. If you get married and you get a chance to marry 4 times, they'll be giving you 40 to 50 lakhs in cash for your marriage function. So that's something also coming up with all these mm, people. And then uh, like you are allowed to do businesses with people entering into the country. So without your approval, they cannot even enter into the business. So you can have 20 to 30 businesses in your own name, getting money without doing anything. What else do you need, dude? Right? What else do you need? So money making is not a problem if you are a sheikh, right? Somewhere in Dubai, somewhere there, right? But if you're not someone there, then there's a lot of problem. So that's how they take care of their local people. So that's what local prejudice is all about in UAE. Okay, so with strategic alliance, you get 4 types of advantages: organizational, economic, strategic, and political. Organizational, economic, strategic, and political. Okay, and what are the disadvantages? So there is one important disadvantage, and that is sharing. Whenever you have partners coming in together, whenever you have people coming in together to achieve a common objective, generally there are trade secrets which are being shared, and it happens. I have been working with various organizations, and we all know that what are their trade secrets, what are they up to, right? What do they do? how they deal with the different situations, what are their responses to different situations, what is the high time objective of doing something, right? And that's how it rolls. So things have been put like that only. Okay, taking care of all this. So the major disadvantage, I'll want you to read. I'll want you to read, and please do give it a reading. So yeah, here it is. So the major disadvantage is sharing. And what is being written here? Strategic alliances requiring sharing of resources and profits and also sharing knowledge and skills that otherwise organizations may not like to share. Sharing knowledge and skills can be problematic if they involve trade secrets. Strategic alliances may also create a potential competitor. An ally may become a competitor in future when it decides to separate out. So with Hero Honda also this happened. Okay, let me just go ahead now. So we have done a major strategy, that was expansion strategy. Okay, we did stability strategy, we did expansion strategy, right? And expansion also had expansion in the form of self expansion, expansion through mergers and acquisitions, and expansion through strategic alliance. I'm just trying to revise what we did. Okay, with expansion through your self efforts, we had intensification and diversification. With intensification, we had three different things: market penetration, product development, market development. And with the your with your diversification strategy, we had four types of diversification divided into two, that is related and unrelated. With related diversification, we get a benefit which is known as synergy. High levels of synergy in the first two that I'm taking names of, that is vertically integrated diversification and horizontally integrated diversification. Low level of synergy in the last one, which I'm taking the name as concentric diversification. Yes, there is a completely unrelated diversification with no synergy at all. That is conglomerate diversification, right? Okay, apart from that, we have merger and acquisition. That is an instant means of achieving expansion. If I had to talk about mergers and acquisitions, they are generally resorted to for the benefits of synergy only. But yes, you might have businesses which do not provide you that synergy. That's also equally all right. Okay, now talking about mergers and acquisitions, I would also want to say that mergers is something on a friendly terms and acquisition is something on a more hostile manner. In a more hostile manner, where a powerful company tries to absorb a weaker company, right? And is generally resorted to in terms of recession, in times of recession, and things like that, wherein you can easily acquire companies at a lower amount of money, right? So that happens. Okay, so that's what your strategies. Okay, so mergers and acquisitions may also be resorted to. They would be instant, they would be quick. You would not be required to understand how things would work around it. It's already decided, it's already ready, and you might decide to come together. Okay, could also be related and unrelated, and they could be classified as vertical merger, horizontal merger, co-generic merger, and conglomerate merger. So that's how we had discussed it. Okay, and it was something that was done today only. Right, so mergers was also done. And then came the concept of strategic alliance, wherein you did not want to develop something and nor did you want to acquire or come together for something by involving legality into it. You just decided to be a more be a bit more friendly with each other, so that you could do better in the organizations. You could better do as an independent organization, coming together for strategic causes, coming together for economic benefits, coming together for some political benefits, coming together for any such benefit possible. Right? So you get organizational benefits, you get strategic benefits, you get political benefits, you get economic benefits. Right? So all such benefits that you get out of it is something that you enjoy. Okay, then the next strategy is retrenchment strategy. And retrenchment strategy is a grand strategy with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. There has been a problem in this module where they have mentioned retrenchment strategy or turnaround strategy. I'm sorry to say that turnaround strategy is a part of retrenchment strategy and not at all a substitute word for retrenchment strategy. So please make sure that you do not make this kind of a mistake whenever you are studying. Like, a lot of students have a habit of comparing books with books, right? So they generally tend to pick up ICI module, and they generally tend to seek that what are the changes between SIR's teaching and what are the changes between ICI's teaching. Although there are none, the changes are almost nil, right? But I do have a better arrangement, and at least when something is principally incorrect, I have not always highlighted it, I have not always taken it through. So this is somewhere that I have not decided to take it through. And once you read that concept altogether, you'll also understand that yes, there is some mistake in naming the concept. So maybe there would be a correction in coming future, but let's not try and learn that way, so that we make more mistakes. So we don't want to make mistakes. There would be one sub-concept asked or tested in the examination, and you should prepare accordingly. Okay, retrenchment is something. See, you have already pursued stability. You've already understood what expansion is. So, what do you mean by retrenchment? Retrenchment is something just opposite of expansion. So, you are trying to reduce the scope of the activity. Why? Because you would have learned that things are not going the way that it should have. Actually, you know, with the Tata Motors is already on a retrenchment strategy only. They have been implementing their retrenchment strategy in the nature of turnaround strategy since last 2 to 3 years. And they have been able to successfully pull out their company, and they have been able to successfully implement turnaround strategies. However, turnaround strategy culture is still going on. However, the turnaround strategy culture is still going on. Okay, for a matter of explanation, for a matter of explanation, you can just look at it once and let me know. Please read it for once for yourself. All the 3 points: turnaround, divestment, liquidation, and as well as the first four to five lines. Once you do so, I'll be able to guide you more. Once you do so, I'll be able to guide you more. Okay, let me come to it. You have read something that will add to your understanding. See, retrenchment is a situation where things are not going good. Now, what you can try to do is, you can try to do the retrenchment internally, as well as you can try to pursue retrenchment externally with external measures. See, cutting off something means to understand that the things are not going in the right direction, and this could be internal also. Internal means what? At points of time, we do agree and we do appreciate this fact that at certain points of time, you are required to take a step back. You are required to reduce the scope of the activities you are pursuing right now. You are required to kind of adjust to the situation. You might not just produce too many cars when the car business is not going good. You might not be wanting to spend too much on machinery when the business is not going good. You might even decide to sell out 2 to 3 machineries at that point of time. You might also decide to liquidate some part of your plant and machinery at that point of time. But that does not mean that you want to close the business. See, internal retrenchment means trying to understand and trying to restructure what we have been doing so far and taking a call that how to now reverse the process of decline. So if you are going in the wrong direction, what does a turnaround means? Okay, now I start to move to the right direction. First of all, you also know that with any kind of turnaround, which is internal, which is happening inside of me, which I am trying to implement within the company. What would turnaround mean? Turnaround means trying to reverse the process of decline. So first of all, the situations are not good. You are already going into a process of decline and you are trying to reverse it. With reversal, first of all, what should be done? The first activity that should be done is cutting off on expenses, cutting off on unnecessary expenses, because you already are going into a wrong direction and you're already not able to chunk money out of it. It would be important that you decide to cut off your expenses. It's very important to cut off the expenses. If you just don't cut off the expenses, you'll be in a problem. You'll be in a problem wherein things would not go in the right direction at all for you. Right, so you need to cut off the expenses. How do you cut off the expenses? You try and do some things like what I have told, like sell off some assets, because you might not be producing at that capacity and those assets are just lying in the in your factory and they are not giving you any return also. So even at a little loss, you might decide to sell them first. You might decide to look up to the product. You might decide to look up to the market. You might even decide to look at the human resource who have been leading the company so far or leading the major decisions so far, and you might even change them. Right? With Tata Motors, I remember when they had to implement turnaround, what they did was the first thing they decided were that we were having different type of chassis. Right? Chassis is the basic structure on which a car is built. Right? So they were having like 13 types of chassis, right? 11 to 13 types of chassis. So every different car had a different chassis. So what happens is, like, you will always have to produce some cars. You'll always have to produce some cars in advance to have a demand forecast. Otherwise, you'll not even have a demand. If you don't make any car, you'll not be having any demand. Right? So with 13 different types of chassis, I'll always be making cars, right? Yes or no? So I'll be developing chassis first and then the car. So there were different chassis developed. Now with the chassis, which actually did not have any demand for that particular car, was a waste. They decided to actually take up and undertake cars and develop new models on the same chassis, on the existing chassis. So they decided that a new car named Tiago, a new car named Tigor, and a new car named Nexon, they are on the same chassis. They have been built on the same chassis. So three cars into one. Rather than having 13 cars and having 13 chassis, they now decided to reduce the chassis numbers and they brought it to 5. They brought it to just 5. So each of the cars is just built on an existing platform. This is a very good thing, first of all, because you need not re-engineer things again and again. You need not spend much, right? So that is something that comes as a cost cutting activity, right? Then you can also look forward to who has been the supplier of the material. How can we procure better? How can we have a cheaper supply? How can we have a more quality thing? What are the managers thinking about the vision of a car and how they are taking forward, how they are taking it forward, and things like that. So all of these have to be thought for. A turnaround strategy, whenever you start with a turnaround strategy, there are two important things. One is a quick payoff activity. What do we mean by a quick payoff? Now, say for example, you also know that my strategic management classes or ESSM classes, we generally have a business of like 4 to 5 to 6 months, right? That is where you demand classes, like 3 months when a new session starts, and the next 3 months when the new session starts. And generally, there is a gap of 6 months between two attempts, right? So I have a cyclic dealing for like 6 months, and 6 months we are kind of free to record or free to take other things and free to undertake activities which are different. But I decided that I wanted the cycle to continue. So for continuation of cycle, a lot of teachers just came in with fast track batches, revisionary batches, and things like that, and started to speed up the course also, so that any point of time when a student who has just failed and needs classes can take them. So that is something we're trying to understand, that there are quick payoffs involved with it, right? So you build something, you instantly sell it, they sell like hotcakes, you get money, and you are like fine. So you have to find out these things. So with Tata Motors, they started understanding that, see, quality in design is something that people are looking for, and they first of all started designing good models. That was primarily important to revamp the image that Tata already had. And ultimately, I'm very sure within next 3 to 4 to 5 years, Tata will develop a great brand image in terms of cars it produces and in terms of cars it sells. Okay. So if the organization chooses to focus on ways and means to reverse the process of decline, it adopts a turnaround strategy. This is called an internal. This is called an internal retrenchment. Internal retrenchment. If this internal retrenchment is not successful, and if you even could not work with it, what you will have to do, you'll have to try and sell the business. You'll have to try and sell the business, or you'll have to curtail the product line, or you'll have to close that thing. Right? Now, there are two ways to close things. See, when I was teaching, I started with teaching 11th and 12th. Way back in 2016. So it's more than 4 years from now, right? More than 4 years since then, I should say. So I used to teach 11th and 12th. So I had made some capital expenditure in and around the building, in and around the floor wherein I decided to teach, and the floor was on rent, but you have to do some capital expenditure related to partitions of classroom and things like that, so that students can come and learn from us. So I did so. I also put in some furniture, put in some infrastructure, put in some fixtures, put in podiums and things like that, and getting the air conditions in, getting those air conditioners fitted. So I did everything that was required for taking a good class, right? And then I was supposed to teach. The business went well, quite well. It was running in a good way, but I was not getting that kick. You sometimes don't just feel like taking things forward because you have a gut feeling that you are meant to do something else, right? And I had that gut feeling that I was meant to teach chartered accountancy only, and I should undertake to teach subjects like EISSM, ISCA, ITSM, and things like that. So I had made up my mind that I'll be taking up these kinds of concepts only. So when I decided to take this up, I had to, like when I decided to take this up, I had to just leave that particular place also, because that was not required. For taking online classes from teaching through studio, this was not actually required. So when I had to take that decision, I started finding someone who could actually purchase my business as such. Who could actually purchase my business as such. Right. So without even considering any turnaround or something like that, because I was not happy and satisfied with the way things were going on, I decided to divest. And divestment and liquidation has a major difference, which has not been mentioned by words, right? Which has not been mentioned by words, but once you understand, you will acknowledge the same. So I'm trying to explain that particular difference. So I started finding someone who could take that place on rent. Definitely that was something that landlord also wanted, and he would have been very happy. So he was very happy with the fact that I had found someone. Just a moment. Just a moment. I'll just have to interact with someone. Give me a moment. I'll be back. Ansh? Ansh? नहीं, नहीं। आप एक बार ना यहाँ पे नीरज जी का नंबर लिखाओ। डबल 929 या फिर आप अंदर घंटी बजा के बात हैं। इमाम किधर? वहीं है। Okay, back to square one. I think we should begin with the things that I was continuing to say. There is this turnaround strategy, divestment strategy, and liquidation strategy. Please understand, when I had this problem of my institute being shut up or deciding to be shut down, I wanted someone maybe someone who could have a similar kind of setup, who would be requiring a similar kind of setup and would be wanting to run classes in it. So that was the specific demand that I had. So there came in someone who wanted to teach who wanted to teach for banking examinations. So there was someone who wanted to teach for banking examinations. So they came together, they came forward, and they said that, okay, sir, we want to buy this. Like, we want to buy the whole partitions, your furniture, and everything together. And can you just please sell it to us also? So I decided that yes, it's very simple now, right? It became simpler for me because I was selling a classroom now to them rather than selling individual assets like chairs, tables, and things like that for almost less than what I would have expected it for. It was better to sell the business as a whole as such. So I sold them everything that I had. I just said that you can just apply new banners to the already set up advertisements. What you just need to design new banners and put it up. So that's what I told them, and they did that. They did that as well. So when they did that, they could actually get their advantage, and I got my own advantage out of it. I got my own advantage out of it for the fact that I was not required for the fact that I was not required to actually sell it piece by piece. Otherwise, if I had to sell podium, it would not have fetched any value for me. If I had to sell chairs and tables across directly, it would not have fetched much value. If I had to sell, I have to just get those ACs separated from the wall and then sold. It would have not fetched such value for me. So ultimately, value addition could have happened only when the actual divestment happened, right? So that is still a favorable thing to consider. Trying to sell the whole business as such, trying to sell the whole business as such is a favorable understanding of things. But if you are not able to do so, you go for liquidation. That is selling assets individually, and that will not fetch any value rather than a scrap value. So everything would have become scrap if that particular person would not have arrived and taken my institute as such, right? So that put me at an advantage, and I got some lakhs of rupees. Otherwise, I would have got some or maybe just a lakh of rupees, right? So that's what I would have got generally, and what I got was something beyond basic expectation, or what I had expected for if I was selling the business as such. So that was the advantage that I got. Okay, so whether or not that you follow a turnaround strategy or not, you'll always be following a divestment strategy and then a liquidation strategy. If divestment strategy does not work, you might just go for liquidation. But if turnaround strategy does not work, you will generally go for divestment. If divestment does not work, you will generally go for liquidation. So that is true. But at times, people do decide that they don't even want to go for a turnaround. And they are very sure that this business would not work despite any efforts put in or despite any efforts put into place. So I might just mark my step one as divestment. And if divestment does not work, I may just mark my step two as liquidation. Why am I saying this? Because a lot of times a student might also feel that can't we just go for directly the step three without looking for step one and step two? I would say that trying to sell assets directly or trying to sell assets one by one for a liquidation purpose and trying to sell them as a scrap would not that would that not just put you in a problem situation and put you in a discomfort? You'll definitely try for selling it as such. Now, even if I'm sitting in this particular classroom and if I have to just like migrate to some other city to do my work, I will try and find someone who is already into coaching so that I can sell each and everything that is put here. Right? It is a beautifully set up classroom. So I'll always look for someone who is already into coaching industry only so that I can sell the classroom as such to him, right? So that would fetch me more money. So always a divestment has to be considered before liquidation. A turnaround may still not be considered before divestment. So ideally it should be taken up as a step one, step two, step three, or we can also have one alternative to it, that divestment could be considered as a step one and liquidation could be considered as a step two. So we have two approaches, whether to consider for turnaround or whether not to consider turnaround and directly go for divestment. So these are only the two ways of taking things forward. With turnaround, we are trying our level best that the business resumes its old ways of doing things. The business is into a better situation, and the business gives you returns, right? So that is the that is what internal retrenchment is. So see, someone external has to be involved for a divestment or a liquidation. So divestment will be an external retrenchment or an external reconstruction with the help of someone outside. And liquidation is also what? External retrenchment. Okay, so make sure that you have this in your books, well sorted, well understood, and in your thought process at the very same time. So turnaround is something that is internal retrenchment. Turnaround is something which is internal retrenchment. Although the following lines already has what I have already told, but yes, having said that, I would always want you to put it up as a heading so that you don't miss out on anything. Okay, so what is turnaround strategy? Retrenchment may be done either internally or externally. External retrenchment includes divestment and liquidation. External retrenchment includes divestment and liquidation. For internal retrenchment to take place, emphasis is laid on improving internal efficiency, known as the turnaround strategy. Known as the turnaround strategy. Okay, so that's what I was supposed to ensure, right? Okay, so for internal retrenchment, places laid on the emphasis is laid on improving what? Your internal efficiency, that is turnaround strategy. Now, there are certain conditions or indicators which point out that a turnaround is needed. What will happen in the examination is there would be a case-based question, a small caselet. Calling it a case-based question, a detailed case-based question would be a shame to case-based questions, right? So the institute has made it quite clear that there would be a small caselet, and that also is just one question. Otherwise, major questions are direct only in strategic management. So make sure not to be too much worried about the case-based questions. Either be too much worried about the concept so that you understand. However, if a caselet question comes in, or however a small case-based question comes in the examination, it would be somewhere like this only. That a business of XYZ was happening and it was in this, and it has been recently been facing all these issues, and these kind of issues would be there. What does it say? Persistent negative cash flows from businesses. Okay, uncompetitive products or services. Okay, the market share has been declining. Staffing is overstaffing. High turnover of employees. That employees are generally leaving the company very easily, and they have decided like major of the employees are just leaving the company. Low morale management. People are not happy also. They are not feeling good. Okay, now you will say that okay sir, if anything like this is written, I'll just say that turnaround strategy has to be applied. Like I would just want you to look forward to one particular sentence. That is the very first sentence. That is persistent negative cash flow from businesses. Okay, now this is it. I'm also trying to show you the divestment strategy. That is 1 or 2 pages later. So just look at this one also. Why am I trying to emphasize on all these things? You'll be able to understand. It says, okay, there are reasons given for it. I'm just marking it directly. Reasons. And I'm just going towards point number 2. Just look at it. Persistent negative cash flows from a particular business. Even that was there with what? With your turnaround strategy. Persistent negative cash flow from business. Right? So even this language continues with this as well, but it has something more added to it. So it has more, what do you say, masala in it. So persistent negative cash flow from a particular business create financial problems for the whole company. So the persistent negative cash flow is of such nature that other businesses or the whole company is getting affected from it, right? So it is trying to emphasize the fact that the problems related to turnaround have now aggravated. They have been increased many folds, and you are getting those heavy problems out of it, right? So make sure there is a line of difference which can spoil the answer completely for you in the examination. Make sure that there is just one line of difference that can spoil the answer for you totally, that can just spoil the answer for you totally. So in the examination you're not supposed to make such a mistake. In the examination you're not supposed to make such a mistake. So that is why I am here, and that is why I'm always guiding you towards this particular fact that you need to take care about it. Okay, what does it say more? What more has been written? It says persistent negative cash flow from businesses, uncompetitive products or services, declining market share, overstaffing, high turnover of employees, and low morale management. Action plan for turnaround. What is the action plan for turnaround? Okay, so how do you undertake a turnaround strategy? So that could be very much company specific, but then there are certain favorite steps that everyone wants to give, and this is so simple. The steps are so simple. Just assess the current problems first. See, I've always said that if I had like 100 seconds for solving a problem, I'll just take 80 seconds defining it. The problem, if defined correctly, the problem, if understood correctly, has a solution beneath it. Right? The problem, if understood correctly, has a problem beneath, has a solution beneath. So always define the problem. You should always define the problem. I've always been of this opinion that you should always define the problem well enough. If you just don't define the problem clearly, you are going to be in a mess. You are going to be in a mess. And that's something clear. That's something absolutely clear. That you are going to be in a mess if you don't define your problems clearly. So problems can be clearly defined only and only when they have been clearly understood. So you need to define the problem first and then look for solutions. So the first thing is define the problem, assess the problem. Why? Because you have been not been able to do good. So that's not something that you would not have tried for, right? Like if I was having negative cash flows, maybe it happened in one quarter, I would not have just shooed it away. That oh, it happened. Okay, it would not happen again. Just chill, guys. Just chill. I'm here. It would not happen like that, right? I would have definitely initiated something, and I would have definitely taken up something, right? I would have assessed some problem at that point of time, and I would have tried to apply the solution. But that even did not work. So it's very important to now understand the correct problems, right? So an assessment of current problems is something that's completely important. So what does it say? The first step is to assess the current problems. Once the problems are identified, the resources should be focused towards those areas essential to efficiently work on correcting and repairing any immediate issues. So there could be immediate issues. Okay, then stage 2. Analyze the situation and develop a strategic plan. Identify appropriate strategies and develop a preliminary action plan. Identify appropriate strategies and develop a preliminary action plan. Analyze the strengths and weaknesses in the areas of competitive position. Once major problems and opportunities are identified, develop a strategic plan with specific goals and detailed functional actions. So it says that you should have a small plan ready. Once major problems are identified, then you can go for a detailed action plan, right? So you make a fundamental plan, you try to develop a detailed plan out of it. So have a plan. Okay, so problem followed with a plan and then implement that plan. So what does it say next? It says if the organization is in a critical stage, an appropriate action plan must be developed. The plan typically includes human resource, financial, marketing, and operations actions to restructure debts, improve working capital, reduce cost, improve budgeting practices, and accelerate high potential products. High potential products. Accelerate high potential products. If you realize that, see, this product is going to go well at this point of time, it's better to go for that particular product only, right? And accelerate that. Try to push that product, right? Try to make known to people that you have this product coming in. A positive operating cash flow and enough funds to implement must be established. The turnaround strategies must be raised. So you need to generate some cash also. Stage 4 is about restructuring the business. So see, you understand the problem, you define a plan, you implement the plan, and then the business will start restructuring. Okay, if the core business is irreparably damaged, then the outlook for the entire organization may be colorless. So true. Prepare cash forecasts, analyze assets and debts, review profits, and analyze other key financial functions to position the organization for rapid improvement. Right? So you need to understand that what the environment is, how we have been positioned as of now. Both the things are very important. Right? So first of all, your position is not very good. You might be having negative cash flows. That also means that your debt would also be pressurizing you. Your profits are not there. Your assets could be extra. Some unnecessary assets could be there. Whenever there is a shortage of funds, you realize that you have spent unnecessarily, right? Without having a shortage of funds, you don't really realize that you spent unnecessarily when you had them. So that's something of a learning that you should always take. Okay. During the turnaround, the product mix may be changed. During the turnaround, the product mix may be changed, requiring the organization to do some repositioning. So product mix is changing, trying to change, trying to bring in something new, trying to change the product in a way that absolutely attaches well with the market and pushing on the products which are good, which are potentially good. The people mix is another important ingredient in the organization's competitive effectiveness. I'm also going to change some people. I'm also going to change some people. I'm also going to change my employees also, because it's because of them that we reach this position. So it should not be because of them that we reach another difficult position. So when we are trying to go for a turnaround, a lot of odd thinking people, a lot of people who don't have their thought process aligned with what we have been doing, uh, should be able to carry through the organization. So they should ideally be just removed. Okay, what does stage 5 mean? Stage 5 is about returning to normal. Stage 5 is about returning to normal. So what does stage 5 say? In the final stage of turnaround strategy process, the organization should begin to show signs of profitability, return on investments, and enhancing economic value added. So it says in the final stage of turnaround, organizations must show signs of profitability, some good ROIs, and enhancing economic value added. So that's how it has been positioned and placed. Okay. I think we are in a right state of mind where I can take a 5 minute break and we'll come back and we'll discuss the rest of the stuff and we'll wrap it up, right? So we have a small class, but yes, I'll do take a break because there are some things that are important and need to be taken care of. So sorry, I'll be coming back within like just 4 to 5 minutes. I'm back. And I feel that I might have incurred a problem here. Just give me a moment. Okay, I think that. Oh. Okay, there was an internet issue simultaneously at the same time. So I think I should resume now. I was here only by the time things went bizarre. So let's continue. Let's keep continuing the way we were and way things were going on. Just give me a moment as to internet issues that keep on cropping up these days. Nowadays in Jaipur, we have been facing constant problems regarding our broadbands because there is a lot of, that Jaipur is a very beautiful city, and especially with Diwali times, Jaipur is very good. Like it is beautiful beyond limits. So the next month that we have Diwali, uh, all those repair works have been undertaken, right? And that's where we are facing problems. And there have been internet issues, constant internet issues coming up. And I've realized that this is something that's so unacceptable that I like it just pisses me off a lot. But however, nothing can be done at this point of time. So I'm just carrying on with the things that have been uh, told to, right? So what are the important elements of a turnaround strategy that may be watched for while its implementation? So the first thing is that major elements of turnaround strategy, like whenever I am implementing turnaround strategy, what would be the kind of decisions that I would be taking up, right, at that point of time. So that's what they are trying to emphasize upon. So they say that the first thing is changes in top management. Definitely, with the earlier set of top management, you know what we have achieved, right? And that's something not appreciable. So the overall corporate level managers, they will come down and check, okay, this is not going good. Yes, you business level manager, why so? What would be done? Some business managers could be changed. So the top management could ideally have a change. Okay. Then identifying quick payoff activities. So something that pays well and pays quick may also be looked forward to. So quick payoff activities is something that people would always look forward to. People would also look forward to quick cost reductions. People shall also look forward to quick cost reductions. Okay, that how we can just reduce cost on some X, Y, and Z stuff and just stop it, right? Because otherwise we'll be yielding a loss. Revenue generation. So how to generate more revenue? Then asset liquidation for generating cash. So liquidation of some of the assets. You know that a lot of assets might not be put into use now. A lot of assets may not be required as of now. So it's better to go for some asset liquidation. At least that money would pump a new fuel in the company, and you'll be able to like run it for a longer duration. Better internal coordination is also something that we require. I think for this day or for today, we have like discussed quite enough, and I'm not wanting and willing to take a new topic upfront because that does not just happen with 2 or 3 minutes in the bucket, and we just don't do that any day, right? We just don't do that any day. So we always have been opinionated about it, and I've always have been like leaving you before time with your lectures. So this is going to be true today also.